So, let's talk about negativity. When we're close to someone who's feeling angry or sad, it can make us feel bad too. It's like everyone around gets dragged down with them. And the same is true in language. When a word like not wanders into a sentence, it affects everything around it. And there are even some words that are such downers that they only get invited to the saddest language parties. So, how can we tell when where these woeful words will appear? I'm Rigel Syefa Zarnuji Diza, and this is the link space. There are lots of different kinds of information that we can communicate with our sentences. And as we've talked about in the past, one of the ways we can get something across to someone is by what a sentence entails. For example, the sentence Riley and her family moved to San Francisco tells you that Riley and her family must have traveled there, since it's pretty hard to move somewhere without actually going there too. This inference works because the first sentence, the one with move, entails the second, the one with travel. To get specific, there's no way that Riley and her family moved to San Francisco could be true, while Riley and her family traveled to San Francisco is false. The truth of the first sentence guarantees the truth of the second. But just like how our lives can feel like they've been turned inside out when we relocate to a new city, the relationship that hold between sentences can be put under a lot of strain once we introduce a little bit of negativity. Take the sentence, Riley and her family didn't move to San Francisco. Suddenly, the connection is broken. We cannot say for sure, one way or the other, whether Riley and her family traveled there. Maybe they did, just to visit or something. Maybe they've never been to San Francisco in their lives. All we know is they didn't move there. But, so what? It isn't a huge surprise to find out that negotiation changes the meaning of a sentence. The thing is, when we go negative, something else happens too. Now we can stick in some other words that we couldn't before. Like we could say Riley and her family didn't move to San Francisco at all. Or Riley and her family didn't give a hoot about moving to San Francisco. These expressions are known as negative polarity items, or NPIs. They call that because they thrive in negative environments. When we try to put NPIs into a positive sentence, well, they really put up a fight. Riley and her family moved to San Francisco at all. Sounds about as good as broccoli on pizza. And Riley and her family give a hoot about moving to San Francisco isn't much better. So, it looks like negations, entailment, destroying powers, are what open up the gates and let these gloomy little creatures in. Except we can actually find NPIs in other sentences too, like in the sentence out of Riley's memory, that are at all said would eventually make her cry. That at all is an NPI since it doesn't fit very well into a sentence like Riley's memories are said all. But it's perfectly comfortable in something like Riley's memories aren't said at all. What's even weirder, though, is that if we move the NPI over to the very end of that first sentence, we get all of Riley's memories that are said will eventually make her cry at all, which has gone back to being strange. So what's going on here? To get a better grip on the behind the scenes action in charge of all this NPI business, we need to go back to the beginning and focus on something that we skipped over the first time around. When we stuck negation into that first sentence, we didn't just break the relationship it had with the second one. We reversed it. The negations of that second sentence actually entails the negations of the first. So if Riley didn't even travel to San Francisco, She definitely couldn't have moved there. Now that we're thinking about it this way, we have what we need to figure out what's happening inside the sentence. All of Riley's memories that are at all said would eventually make her cry. Let's first look at a smaller version. Said memories can make Riley cry. Notice that it entails the much more general sentence. Memories can make Riley cry. If it's true that said memories can do it, then it's true that memories can, so entailment runs it the direction from the specific to general. But when we stick all at the beginnings of each of the sentences, suddenly something that should be starting to get familiar happens. The directions of the entailment gets reversed. Now, if all of Riley's memories are able to make her cry, then it's definitely true that all the said ones can. The word all, just like negation, turns entailment upside down, and just like negation, it lets in NPIs like ever and at all. Hence, all of Riley's memories that are at all said will eventually make her cry. But if a word like all can do this, why can't we just put an NPI at the end and say all of Riley's said memories will make her cry at all? Well, to explain this, we're going to need tweak our definition of entailment a little. Up until now, we've been talking about entailment as a relationship that holds between sentences, but we should really be thinking about it as a relationship that holds between sets. So, back when we talked about generalized quantifier theory, we said that quantifiers like some and all compare sets. All says that the first set it combines with is a subset of the second, while some says that the intersections of the two sets it compare is non-empty. Looking at a word like all from this angle, we can now consider each of the two sets it combines with. Let's go back to the sentence that memorize can make Riley cry. If that's true, then the more general sentence memorize can make Riley cry must also be true, and this is default. Entailment runs in an upward direction, moving us from a smaller set like set memorize up to a larger one like just plain memorize. So that means that being in the smaller set entails being in the bigger one. And this isn't just true of noun phrases, it's true of verb phrases too. The more specific sentence set memorize make Riley cry loudly entails the more general sentence set memorize make Riley cry. So as sets get bigger, entailment runs up. But look at what all does to each of the sets it combines with. When we put the quantifier back at the start of each sentence, the directions of the entailment in the first set now runs down from bigger to smaller sets. So all memorize make Riley cry entails all side memorize make Riley cry. For this reason, the quantifier all along with a word like not is said to be downward entailing. It turns the directions of entailment in the first part of the sentence on its head. But all leaves the direction of entailment second half of the sentence because all memorize make Riley cry loudly entails all memorize make Riley cry, where we're still moving from a smaller to a larger set, but we have a contrast in what all does to the different parts of the sentence. The set represented by the noun phrase in the leftmost part of the sentence gets turned upside down, but the rightmost set represented by the verb phrase stays pointing up. So from there, we can get a bit more specific and say that all is left downward entailing but right upward entailing. Remarkably, this seems to account for why all lets NPIs into the beginnings of sentences but doesn't allow them to appear at the end. The beginnings are downward entailing, but the ends aren't, and every single one of the quantifiers we'll find in English, along with in other language, can be classified in this way. For example, Some is both left and right upward entailing, which means it doesn't reverse entailments at the beginning or the end, while no is both left and right downward entailing, so it reverses both. Meanwhile, every and all are a mix, and so some cannot combine with any NPIs. But no is more than happy though. We cannot say someone ever liked that stupid gum commercial song, but it's perfectly fine to say no one ever liked that stupid gum commercial song. The downward entailing environments created by words like not and no and even all spell out just where these sorts of words can show up. Even we aren't consciously aware of the abstract relationships operating the controls of language. They play a big part in how it works, and when it comes to NPIs, it looks like a little negativity. It's a pretty positive thing. So we've reached the end of the link space for this week. If you manage to keep your entailments pointed in the right directions, you learn that some words like ever and any are negative polarity items, that these NPIs is only show up in certain contexts, namely ones that reverse the directions of entailment, and that we can categorize words based on whether they create downward entailing environments. The link space is produced by me.